Welcome back to Hometown Friends, where we explore the friendships that inspire our social development. My name is Chandler Hoffman, and I'm your host of this podcast. My guest today is James LaBlanc, who is an author and nationally recognized public speaker who inspires his audiences with his courageous story of redemption. As he details in his memoir called The Miracle, James, or Jimmy as he was called as a kid, was a biracial kid adopted into a white family who grew up in a wealthy neighborhood in the hills of Berkeley, California. And as he will discuss, James often felt like he didn't belong because of this. Even with this, though, his early childhood was seemingly idyllic. And then, due to a number of negative family events, his life turned upside down, leading to a series of very negative childhood experiences, including living in poverty and suffering abuse. In adolescence and much of his adult life, James suffered from addiction and ultimately went to prison. The inspiration to change his life came when he found his spiritual path, and with the help of his wife, found his birth family, where he focused on forgiveness and making amends to others and to himself. And through all of this, there was a hometown friend. Please enjoy my discussion with an inspirational human, a man who I now have the honor to call my friend. James LaBlanc. Let me just say, welcome to the Hometown Friends podcast. I have so many questions and thoughts and excited to talk to you today. I'm not even sure if we ever really knew each other that much, but man, getting to know you through your memoir was an amazing experience, really amazing hometown experience for me.
Man, thanks for having me, Chan. Dr. Hoffman.
Dude, thank you so much.
No, we did not know each other but when I saw you on Facebook, I recognized you. You weren't a stranger to me, but we definitely had auxiliary adjacent friendships that connected us, probably 1 or 2 degrees of separation.
So I'm curious. We come from the same hometown, but what was it like for you specifically growing up in your hometown?
So I grew up in the Berkeley Hills. So I was born an orphan. The good news was I was adopted immediately. I was born in San Francisco, and I was adopted by obviously my parents who were in Berkeley. And my mom had received an inheritance before I was born back in the early 60s. And with that, they moved out of their tiny apartment in the flatlands into a beautiful Maybach in the Berkeley Hills. Lost the rest of the money in the stock market. And but we always had that house, right?
I mean, let's stop on the Maybach for just a second. I mean, if anybody knows anything about architecture, they know who Maybach is, right?
Yeah, Bernard Maybach. So I think he built the whole block. I grew up on Greenwood Terrace, which is right off of Buena Vista, which is right off of Euclid. For the context for our hometown homies, and
nice.
That had this huge picture window that you could just see straight into the bay, right? On the bridge, and on the weekends you see the bay full of sailboats, and at night just all the lights of San Francisco, and it's just beautiful, man. Before the divorce, those first 7 years were great. We went camping, we went cherry picking, we went to Strawberry Candy, we went to Cal games, we followed the band after the games, walked around campus, and we went to Calistoga, like I said, camping. We went to Calistoga all the time. Wow. And just did stuff, and went down to the fireworks on the 4th of July. Like we did, down at the marina.
And go back a little bit too. Like you said, you were born an orphan. Tell us that story. What's that mean to you?
Yeah, it meant a lot. It was tough. It was real tough being adopted. I'm biracial. I was adopted by a white couple, right, who already had 2 white children who they also adopted. And then I grew up in the hills. There weren't any other black people around me. There was one old black dude named Al who lived down the street, and he was so cool. He would be like, "Hey, man," every time I saw him, I'd be like, "Hey, Al," and it was definitely tough because I didn't really know who I was or where I came from. Not only did I not match, but I wasn't getting, I was getting negative messages all through my childhood at home. Like they say, things got greater later. My mom got some help, and just when the divorce happened, something snapped, man. And like you say, we were broke. All of a sudden, there was no money. Like we were food stamps, and then we're in this really nice neighborhood. So there was this whole thing all around me. I see wealth,
Yes. Yes.
doing wealthy things, and we were like hungry a lot and being abused. And then
Yeah.
it was physical, it was emotional. I was given away at birth. My dad left when I was 7. My brother, we didn't touch on this, but my brother was taken out of our home when he was 12 and I was 10. My child, because of the abuse was going on. And then my sister left. She was like 16. She rolled out because of what was
Wow.
going on in the house. That's kind of how I went through life for a lot of years. Was just waiting for the other shoe to
Hmm.
drop. My mom's passed away. She didn't, God rest her soul.
Oh,
She passed away in
rest in
2011.
peace.
Like I say, things got greater later,
Yeah.
and we reconciled, and things were at a good place when she
Oh, I'm
passed.
so glad.
But yeah, it was between like first grade and 7th grade when she remarried. Man,
Wow.
it was tough. Yeah.
What I'm curious about is sort of how friends fit into that, especially your hometown friends, because of course that's what we're talking about.
Right.
But foundational friendships. This is the people that taught us how to be human beings. These are the people that reflected us back to ourselves. Like I learned to be myself from the reflections that people gave me.
I guess the first friendships I made were down at Hillside. That was a neighborhood playground. And a lot of people from Berkeley know Hillside. It was a primary school. So I met my best friend, my lifelong friend, Daniel Fishlow, at Hillside. That's my man.
Nice.
And
Shout out Dan Fishlow.
Fishlow. And so I would go over to his house every day after school. Every day after school, I'd be over at Fishlow's, and we'd have snacks and watch cartoons. And but he really showed me how to be a friend. I will say Fishlow really showed me what friendship meant. He was a way better friend to me than I was to him over the years. I believe. And
Why do you say that? Tell us why
well,
you think that is.
I'll give you one example. In high
Okay.
school, I know I'm jumping way ahead, but in high
That's all
school,
right.
he got his license, and his parents gave him their old car, this Datsun B210, right? And
Nice.
he would let me drive his car. That's another thing. He would just let me. He was just like, here, I have my own set of keys. He like, I mean, are you using the car? It was like the car, right? It's his car. Yeah, can I use the car? He's like, yeah, go
Wow.
ahead.
Because with good friends, you share resources, right? Essentially.
Apparently, yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
so we took the car. We just joyriding up in the hills on Grizzly Peak, and I got pulled over, right? And so I was like, "This is my friend's car," and they're like, "Okay, well, you're going to jail because you're driving a car that's not yours." And they took me to jail. I'm like, I think I was a junior or senior in high school, and I'll never forget sitting in that cell, and that should have been enough right there. That should have been enough. Like, I don't ever want to, because that was terrible. Like, that was like, it's really it's bad when you're just sitting there, nowhere to go. You can't, there's nothing. It's a hard bench or whatever. And finally, they got in touch with Fishlow. They acknowledged that he had let me use the car. They let me go. They had to come. They had to come. Him and his dad had to come and stuff. And that was not cool.
But let's talk about your friends through your Berkeley friends or your hometown friends. But then as you go through your life and you get into your addiction and all of that, what do friends mean to you? And maybe tell us some stories about them.
it really goes all the way back to like 3rd grade because my mom had a boyfriend who smoked a lot of weed, right? And I thought he was cool. He had a motorcycle. It was like, oh, that's what cool people do. So I couldn't wait to do it myself, right? And because that's what grown-ups do, right? I didn't know. And so I go to this big Berkeley High, 4,000 kids or whatever. I was a mess freshman year. Like, I was just a mess. But that was when I was like, well, shoot, man, I'm here at Berkeley High. It's an open campus. Provo Park's across the street. I've always wanted to smoke weed. And so I was like, man, let me go get some weed. Right? So, and then I found, so then what happened, I started buying weed, and these guys came up to me and was like, oh, James, you're James, right? And we heard you got some weed. I was like, yeah. They're like, you want to come to a smoke out?
That's what we're looking for, right? That's why we start to do hella shit, is because people we can belong.
If I weed, I had friends. And
That does sort of stick out, is like there are people that know how to be friends. They're not just there to either use you for having weed or just to smoke together. Now, I will say, many people use drugs to connect with each other, right? They have a common thing that they're doing. People smoke weed together because, again, it's a sort of it's a ritual. It's a common experience, and everybody has this common experience of getting high together. And of course, that was a way that you obviously write it in the book about how you practiced that aspect of making friends by getting high with people, right?
senior year of high school, um, there was just drugs everywhere at Berkeley High. Coke, shrooms, acid, crack. And when I first tried crack, I didn't even know what it was. Like guys were sprinkling it on weed. I tried it, and it's just the story we've all heard of the '80s of the crack epidemic. Like I got turned out immediately, and before I even graduated high
Wow.
school, I walked the stage with I had crack on me when I walked the stage. Yeah,
Oh shit.
and that was June '87. By January of '88, I was in rehab. Right, and I was 18 years old in rehab. Like everybody else is in college or, like I'm in rehab. And I needed to be there. Like my life was ruined, and I got clean, and I was clean for about 9 months, and that's when I met the girl I told you I fell in love, but she didn't get the memo, and that's when I said, okay, I'll show you, I'll hurt me, and I went back out, relapsed, and it got all bad. And I was hanging out, I was broke, and I called Fishlow, right? And this is the first and only time I've ever asked him for something, and I was like, Fishlow, I need some money, right? And really, I had never asked anybody. That's one thing, and it wasn't a pride thing. It's just I couldn't bring myself to do it. You know what I mean? It wasn't like I'm not gonna. It was just I just couldn't. But I was with this girl, and she was like, "We need money. Call people you know, and they'll give it to you." I was like, "You think?" And she was like, "Yeah, it works." I'm like, "All right." So I called Fishlow, and he sent me some money. He sent me. I'll tell you, he sent me $300, right? Which to me was a bonanza, right? So so when I got clean and I kept trying to pay him back, I was like, Fish, I'm making amends, sort of part of the process. And I'm like, that 300 you loaned me, like I need it. He's like, nope, nope, nope. He would not take, he was pissing me off. Like he wouldn't, I have to do this, man. And he's like, nope, nope, nope. So what I did, I came and visited Berkeley. I think this was 2019, and I bought tickets, good seats to the Warriors game. This is back when they were still in Oracle, and I took them to a Warriors game. Really, trust me, with those seats and all that, it definitely covered, that. And so that's how I paid it. I don't think he knows that to this day. If he watches this one, now you know that's how I paid you back, man. Because he would not pay. I was like, dude, I have to pay you back.
It also, you talk about this in the book, so it's really easy to keep referring to it because you created a memoir about sort of your life as an addict and in addiction, and then into jail. Like that tripped me out. I don't know too many people who have gone to prison, James. And as you said, a, a kid from the Berkeley Hills, but it had everything to do with addiction.
I talk about this in the book about addiction, where people think you're choosing the drug over them, and the choice isn't in it. You know what I mean? Like this, it's not a choice. You're not like, well, let's see, should I hang out with Fischel or go do drug? It's not. It's not like that. It's like the drugs just take over.
I've been very angry at my mom for her, for my whole life because of it. But I agree with you that that has helped me see that the addiction, the alcoholism, was not a choice, even though it was a master and it was beyond. It's as they say, it's right. It becomes your best friend. It becomes everything.
So I went to jail the first time I was 20. I turned 21 in jail, and I realized, I'm from the Berkeley Hills, man. Nobody from where I'm from goes to jail. You never see the police in my neighborhood. Like, I was totally unprepared, and so, again, I could hoop, so I made friends that way, and I stayed out of the way, and I was released, but then I was homeless. That's when things got really bad, and I got hooked on heroin, crack, and just everything across the
Wow.
board. Turned into a criminal, right? And I'm the dumbest criminal in the world, by the way. I'm not. I don't have a criminal mind. I always get caught, and then I have a conscience, so I always fess up. You know what I mean? Like I'm just the worst criminal. But I was robbing people, and I would like break a bottle and be like, "Hey, give me your," and some people would be like, "I'm not giving you anything," and I'd be like, "Oh, okay, I just thought I'd ask. I'll be on my way." Like I'm the Berkeley Hills, man. Like so, but then some people would, so I lasted about 6 weeks out there like that, and I got caught. I was facing a lot of time. I was facing 30 years to life. I actually took the deal. It's a whole episode. I had kind of a spiritual experience, and I just felt God telling me, "Look, man, nothing you do works, so try me." And
Wow.
I was like, "Okay, God, I'm gonna try you. If this doesn't work," and I signed off on 30 years to life and just gave it to Him. And that leads us to what you were talking about, that the prison riot. So I got violated in '06, and they gave me an 8-month parole violation, and I went to DC jail, which was a hellhole at the time. It was overcrowded. We were hungry there. Like I was eating sugar sandwiches. Like it was bad. So they sent 100 DC guys up to this place called Moshannon Valley, Pennsylvania, which was, we were all doing like a year or less. So they figured we just stay out of the way and go home. But no, DC is known for one thing in the penal system, and that's DC's going to fight. They're going to take over. And Moshannon Valley was not a jail; it was a deportation center.
Mm.
So there were 1,000 guys there getting deported to their country, mostly like Honduras, Mexico, Central America. So there were a lot of gangs in there, like MS 13, and a lot of gangs. And so there's 1,000 of them and 100 of us at the end of the day, right? And so for me, it's like, okay, I'm not the best mathematician, but that's 10 to 1. So every night where, tensions are rising, and every night I'm sitting in my bunk, and all I can hear is like, I don't know if you can hear that, but
Yep. Yep.
so
You describe it in the book,
yeah,
this sort of grinding, grading,
yeah.
where people are sharpening their shanks. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm laying in my bunk hearing this, and I'm like, so this is where I'm gonna die, right? I'm in the mountains of Pennsylvania. I'm from the Berkeley Hills, right? How am I gonna die this anonymous death in the mountains of Pennsylvania? You know what I mean? Like, who does that? These guys, there's always some leader in jail. This guy Mo, he's like, all right, yo, we gonna go out there and handle these Bamas. That's what DC guys call other people. Like, these Bamas, we gonna go out there, and he's like, you don't have to go, because he knows everybody there is short timer, right? So he's like, we understand, but I know all the real soldiers are gonna go out there, and I'm thinking like, I don't want to go, I'd rather not, but I can't say that, so, because if they do go out to the war and then they come back and I'm still in the pod, like, how'd it go? Like, that's not going to be a good look. My life is going to be worthless at that point. So I went out there to the prison riot. It's like February in the mountains of Pennsylvania, snowing. It's this whole dramatic scene. We go out into the yard, and there's no guards out there. They're just letting it happen. And we're out there, and then this other group, this huge horde of humanity. It's like the Stephen Braveheart, where they're and we're like walking in twos, single file towards them, and I'm way in the back, right? I'm like looking, like, okay. And the leaders come up to each other and they start talking, right? They're talking. It seems like it's kind of congenial. I'm like, okay, this is going well. And then somebody says something, and next thing you know, shanks are out. I was untouched, grace of God. I was untouched. I didn't initiate anything with anybody, because if you do, there's 10 guys on you. So I'm just ready to defend myself. But they kind of knew who they wanted, and I wasn't on the list. So eventually the leader's like, okay, fall back. There's too many of them. I was like, now there's too many. Now you figured out there's too many of them. So we run back, to the pod, and the door's locked. So we're in the camera like, pop the door. So the guards are like, and they get right on us, and the door pops. And because we know the guards are just like, okay, now. So, and because they do you dirty in there, man. They do. But anyway, so we fall in, and this is the funny part of the story. We fall in, we tumble in, and guys are all bloody, like broken ribs, poked up. Nobody died, nobody, but the guys got messed up, stomped out, and I'm fresh, like I'm unmarked. And so Mo's walking around again. Mo, he's walking around dapping everybody. Okay, soldier, good. You stood tall. He gets to me and he's like, and it's like, I'm like, hey, and he's like, man, did anybody see Jay? They call me Jay. Anybody see Jay out there? And I'll never forget this youngin that fooled with me, Trey. He was like, yeah, I seen Jay out there. He's like, what was he doing? I was like, yeah, what was I doing, man? And he was like, he was rumbling, man. I was like, yeah, oh yeah, I was giving it to him, man. I was a good prison ride, So, but I wasn't rumbling at all. But he just did me a solid, and I was like, so Mo was like, okay, soldier. I was like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. That's really stuck out for me, James, in the book. That moment that somebody out of some compassionate part of that dude said to protect you from the wrath of Mo and the idea that you would betray them in some way. He made up something that made you part of the group and gave you a pass just because he was able to do that, probably out of the goodness of his heart.
They knew I wasn't, about that life, as they say. I was just in there. They looked at me as a smart guy. I was like a teacher's aide, and I was like a nerd, kind of like, and I did, but I worked out, and I could protect myself. I knew how to box, and they saw me, and so they knew I wasn't an easy lick, but at the same time, they also knew that I wasn't trying to be a gangster, right? And so I
Right.
think that Trey respected that from me, and I think that's why he stood tall for me. Was like, James don't bother nobody. He's not trying to be someone he's not. I mean, I don't think he went through this entire thought process, but I think that this is kind of what developed from my time in there with him, and so he stood up for me.
I
Yeah,
love it. I love the fact that you had a friendship with this cat and that friendship saved you. I mean, literally saved your life in a lot of ways, right? And out of the authenticity of your friendship, that you were that you probably were somewhat vulnerable with him and that you were transparent with him and that you told him where you were from and that you actually got to know each other.
yeah. He didn't have to say a thing. He could have let
He
me
did not.
deal with
He
that on
did
my
not.
own, and I would have had to
That's
deal
right.
with
He could have just been out for himself, but he protected you
it.
because of a friendship.
And a friendship that came from me just being me. I'm telling you, it's counterintuitive and it sounds crazy, but I learned how to be myself in jail because it doesn't pay to try to be someone else in there. You can't get away with it.
And you talk about that in the book. Like, that's why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I just love your story because first of all, it's inspirational because you are here today. Like, you're alive. I mean, that in itself is fucking amazing,
Yeah.
James, just based on your story. And I don't know if anybody has read The Miracle by James LaBlanc, but I definitely highly recommend it. And I highly recommend the audio book because I could not take it off my ears for 3 days or whatever. I just kept listening to it. So shout out, dude, to the Miracle. Tell us how you got to that place in your life where you were going to write a memoir.
So I had to do some work, and I always, whenever I speak, I talk about this, and this is the shameless plug, the miracle
No, please do. Yeah, plug it.
plug. Man, so but I had to, they say everyone has a book in them, right? And that's definitely true. Everybody has a story. But I was like pregnant. Like I had to get it out. Like it was just, but I did some work before that. I did some work on forgiveness. And to me, my theme is always forgiveness because when I forgave first myself and the way I forgave myself, because I'd always hear that you got to forgive yourself. I'm like, what does that look like? Like, I forgive you. Thank you. I mean, what does that look like? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I had a counselor and I did an exercise where I wrote a letter to myself, but not to James, but to little Jimmy, the little boy who's still inside.
Mm.
Um, before all the trauma, before the divorce, before the abuse, before, that little guy who's just like, hey, life, and that got squashed out of him. And then,
Yeah.
but even though I was abused and things went bad, no one treated him worse than I did, right? Like I took little Jimmy to
Mm.
scary places, prison riots, alleyways, gunshots, prison, trap houses, and I fed him poison every day for years, right? No one did that but me. So I owed little Jimmy an apology, and the
Wow.
hit for me was I apologized, and the hit was I promise I'll never treat you like that again. I'll never treat you like that again. And that just is so powerful for me because inside all those big tough guys, there's a little boy who's still in there who we take around with us, and someone can hit the right button, and that 9-year-old will come right out. And I have a picture on my wall of my 7-year first grade picture, and
Nice.
afro and I'm like, man, I got you. And the second
Love
one,
it.
real quick, was my birth mother, right? I had a huge resentment against her for giving me away, and I didn't know the backstory. I didn't know why. All I knew is that she gave me away, and I wasn't feeling that. Um, and so I had again a counselor who kind of really encouraged me to write a letter of amends to her. And I was like, amends? I don't know her no amends. I didn't do none of that, lady. That's exactly what I said at the time. I didn't do none of that, lady. And he was like, well, it's more of a spiritual exercise. It's really not going to make sense until you do it. But I really suggest you do, because otherwise you're probably going to kill yourself, with these drugs and alcohol. And I was in just enough pain to try it, right? And so I wrote a letter of apology to my birth mother, right? Which doesn't really make sense, but when I did, it did something. And the apology was for the resentment, right? For holding a
Right.
resentment against her. For at that time, I was 43 years old. That's a long time to hold a grudge, right? So
Totally.
I wrote a letter of apology, and I'm not gonna lie, the beginning of the letter was like, how could you do that? I was a
Sure.
baby, I was innocent. How could you? And then I got through all that, and then I was like, but you know what? I apologize. I don't know the story. I don't know the reasons. Maybe what you did out of love. Maybe you thought that this would be
Hmm.
the best shot for me. Um, and when I did that work, Chance, this weight I didn't even know that I was carrying around just dropped on. It
Wow.
was like a 400-pound boulder just dropped off my back. And this guy showed up, right? Because before I was real tight. I was, holding on to resentments, like. And I always use this analogy, like when you hold on to resentment, your fists are closed, you're in this posture. And then when you let it
Hmm.
go, you surrender and you forgive, now you're like this, right? And my palms are open. But this is a vulnerable place for me. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Hmm.
wide open, which means
Hmm.
love can come in now, and guidance and God's spirit and all that can come in now. But I'm also open for attack now too. And that's not a safe place for me, right? So I had to do that work. But when I did, man, and then I believe, and this is my belief, that God at that point was just like, now you're ready. And 5 years later, I did more work, more work. And 5 years later, we found my birth mom. It was a whole, my wife
Wow.
found her, and I learned. We met. I was just with her. I was just with her and my aunt last week.
Wow. That's amazing. What a beautiful story. What a beautiful story about self-forgiveness and the opportunity to make amends with yourself, but also with other people. There's a story that you told me when we talked earlier about a guy in high school named Josh, and we'll just use Josh as his name. It brings up this idea of making amends.
Yeah. So there's a guy named Josh in I think I was a senior in science class, and I remember me and Sean Barkman were good friends too, and Josh sat next to anyway. Josh was behind me in class. I sat in front of him, and Josh was just going on me, man. I don't know what was going on, but he was just capping on me, man. It was like going. And I got tired of it. So I just stood up and I turned around and just slapped him. Like I slapped him with everything I had. Just slapped the crap out of Josh, right? And it was like boom, and the whole class just stopped. The teacher sent me to, I got in trouble. I got suspended, and And so I just want to say today, Josh, I apologize. Like that was just dead wrong. And I've been hit before, I mean, people play the dozens. People that doesn't mean you turn around and smack somebody. So that was totally out of line. And I remember I went to the counselor's office, and I remember her telling me, people who behave like you go to prison, man. And I was like, ain't nobody going to prison. Like I'm from the Berkeley Hill. Prison wasn't even in my like nobody going to prison. Now you're being a little dramatic, but guess what? She was.
Wow.
I had some behavior hardwired in
Yeah.
that was very inappropriate. So, but that was wrong. And Josh, if you're out there, I apologize, man.
And so I appreciate you making that amends to Josh and to yourself. So kudos, James LaBlanc.
Thank
I want to go back to Fishlow because that is someone that you shout out and someone that you love, and that I want to bring something that we talked. That I've heard you say before, that he was there for you at an early age, and he was a good friend, and be the kind of friend that we all need. We all need somebody to pay us attention. And one thing that sticks out for me, what you said, is he always answered your call.
Yeah. And like he must be going through his own stuff too, but you would never know it. He would pick up, be positive, be happy to hear from me. Do I need anything? Kind of thing. And just he was solid, man. Just always solid. Like he had reason not to answer because I would just disappear. Like for the '90s, I disappeared basically.
Wow.
And then when I called him, like in the early 2000s, he's like, "Hey, Jimmy, what's going on?" Like it was like, "You're not mad, you're not upset." But we did talk about this when I came back in 2017 for the 30th year reunion. It's funny, we met up at Hillside and played Strikeout, like for old time's sake, right?
I love it.
So
that's great.
So we played Strikeout, and then we took the walk we used to take as kids from Hillside down Euclid to Laval's, Northside Laval.
Right.
And then we ate, and we just did an old time's sake tour kind of thing. And
I love it.
And then, but we were out there in Laval's, and in Northside Laval's has that courtyard right out there, and we were just talking, man. And he did let me know that he was disappointed for a lot of years. He was angry with me for a lot of years. It never showed. I never would have known it, but he was like, "Man, you just, like disappeared." Yep.
It's beautiful. That's really a beautiful story about someone who stays, who was way back and then sort of constantly a presence in your life, and that you can continue to have. I mean, that essentially is kind of a really cool story about a hometown friend. Like the kinds of friendships we have do teach us certain things. Like sometimes when they're really good, like Daniel Fishlow's friendship teaches you how to be a good friend, right? To actually pay attention to people, to answer their calls, to pick them up when they need a resource, to send them money if they actually need money, and then to not take it back because, that's a friend. That I'm curious, has that affected you and the way you are a friend to other people, or the way you talk to your kids about friendship? I don't know.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm realizing I left out a whole subset of friends. So Mario Cockrell, who was Mark Mendoza, who you may have known Mark because he was on the water.
Definitely.
He
he's also a dancer, an amazing dancer. Yeah,
world class tap dancer. Yeah. So me, Mario, Mark, and then Colin Duran, Corey Johnson, Tamiko Lewis. We have this Louise Harm, Kirsten Mickelson, Ava Smith, this whole cohort, Jerry Anderson, who I think you know. Me and Jerry actually had breakfast. I know I'm going all over the place, but I meant to touch on this. Me and Jerry, we go back to fourth grade, and we had breakfast about a year ago, actually now. And he was in the area, and we were talking, and he was like, "Man," because remember what I told you about having the 6-period lunch and how that left me like with no one to hang out with. I was like, "Man, we had the key." I don't know if I should tell this, but let's just say that it's possible that a student may have had the keys to the cafeteria. So there's a rumor that they may have gone in and were able to pluck the classes out for them and their friends. So look at you nodding knowingly. And so, and I had no idea this was going on. Like these are people I know, right? I was like, damn, Jerry, like, why didn't you tell me? And his response was, where were you at? And that's very telling because had I been around, had I been available, but I was at Provo Park or I was at, I was at a smokeout or I was with, meanwhile, all these friends who really were friends from back when we were children would have looked out for me, but I wasn't around.
One has to be around to be a friend. To your point, right? We go off into our worlds, and to actually keep friendships alive, we have to cultivate them. We have to be around. We have to contribute in some way, or at least be available. So many people are dealing with isolation and loneliness in our society. And as we get older and older, you see it more and more. And in this project, I see it all over the place. And yet I do think that's a really well said and a really important point, that you have to be available to people. There is wonder in the world. People do want to connect with each other, and I think that, and I think we miss an opportunity. We maybe think we're not as liked as we are. We often, there's some research about that actually people like you more than you think they like you.
People have called me a friend more in the last year than ever, right? And it's not because of anything I've tried to do, but no, it's the opposite of trying. It's just like I'm enough, man. I think some of it's getting older. Like you take me or leave me. I mean, it's only James I got, and I'm working on James, and hopefully I'm a better man today than I was yesterday. But if I'm not cool enough for you, man, okay. Someone just called me a friend the other day, and I was like, wow, that's such an honorable title to be assigned, a friend. Like, and she was like, he's a coworker and a friend. And man, I was like, man, that's dope.
It does. It is a real honor. It's a real privilege to both feel or to be called a friend and to be a friend to someone else. It's a real privilege. It actually is not to be, again, underappreciated or understated. We take them for granted when we're little kids. We take it for granted, and then the older you get, the more you realize that shit ain't. No one gets. Friendship is an honor. It does not come easily, and it will not stay around if you don't do anything about it. Now, I do think the hometown friend thing is actually something that we can take advantage of, because it does stick out as something that, like, after 40 years, you can come back and drop back into something very, very effortlessly. What a wonderful conversation, man. I think we should end up, but I just want to say I appreciate your story. I appreciate your candor. I appreciate the book. I appreciate you agreeing to do this. I appreciate the opportunity to become a friend with you. I think I posted something about, coming from Maryland and my friends, and my dad is ill. And you said, you reached out to me and you were like, man, if you're ever back in Maryland, let's hang out. And, it took me a little while to understand that was really meaningful to me. And the fact that now I've read your book and now we've had this conversation, I'm going to reach out to you, man, when I get back there. And I'm going to be back there pretty soon. So we're going to kick it, I hope. And I really would love to meet your wife and your dog that was in the background, and you see your house, and I would love to create a friendship with you. The other thing is just, I think your story and your willingness to be authentic is somebody I'd like to cultivate a friendship with. So I hope that we can continue to do that.
Your podcast has helped me a lot. Like from watching it and hearing how others have built up and kept these friendships and how they've done so. It takes intentionality, right? And so I've been much more intentional since I've been watching your podcast with just even throwing a text here and there, or making a phone call, or You know what I mean? Like being intentional
Love
about
it.
more than just liking something on Facebook, or like actually calling someone, or saying, "Hey, let's go get coffee." I appreciate you, Chan, and I'm really glad that we're actually meeting now. We
Yeah.
didn't know each other, but again, you're not. I definitely knew who you were, but now, man, with this podcast, that you've helped me a lot with the guests that you brought on, and I'm honored to be part of that now.
Nice. I love it. Thanks for listening to this episode of Hometown Friends and my discussion with James LaBlanc. There is nothing more inspiring to me than talking to people about their friends. And James's story includes one of the most powerful aspects of friendship, loyalty. William Shakespeare is quoted as saying, "A friend is one who knows you as you are, understands where you have been, accepts what you have become, and still gently allows for you to grow." James's friend, Daniel Fishlow, exemplifies this type of friend. Through it all, he never abandoned him, and although he must have felt betrayed by James and the life he was leading, he never wavered in his loyalty and his kindness to his homie from Hillside. Through James's addiction to marijuana, crack, and his heroin addiction, and through his stints of being homeless and criminal activity and prison stays, through all the times that he was totally unavailable, Daniel was the friend that always answered his call. This almost seems superhuman, and at the same time, it's very human. Research on how children make friends indicates that young children often choose their friends based on propinquity, or those that are in proximity to them. And other research points to the value of similarities and loyalty. Young children often share more with their friends than with the kids they don't know, and adolescents tend to share secrets with those they feel closest to and who are in their social circles. Loyalty is this powerful feeling of allegiance and support to someone, even when they're not actively contributing to your life. Dan's loyalty to James likely allowed for James to see that although he was given away at birth, felt abandoned by his father, experienced abuse by his mother, lost connection to his older brother and to his sister, and he never really felt a deep connection to his friends in adolescence, and he often chose intimate partners based on a desperate desire to belong. There was a constant, trustworthy person in his life. Although there were certainly many reasons why James was able to turn his life around, including his spiritual development and his belief in God, the unwavering support of his wife, and his intellectual abilities and his emotional capabilities. Research on resiliency indicates that it only takes one person that is stable and reliable to allow for a person to believe that they can face adversity and overcome challenges. I'm guessing that Dan provided that for James. We often don't think about friends being so critical, but I think we see here that they are. We should all seek to be the type of friend that does this for others, and you can definitely make a difference in someone's life when you do. If you have a friend that showed this type of loyalty, I want to hear from you. Please reach out to me on Instagram at Hometown Friends Pod, or better yet, subscribe to the Hometown Friends YouTube channel and take the time to comment and share this podcast with your loyal friends. Be a good friend to those around you and to yourself.
We fall down, but we get up.